Welcome everyone, my name is Fist Truck, and today we're going to be trying something kind of different. But before we get into that, first I just want to say Happy New Year. Second, today I'll be ranking all of the weapon classes in Elden Ring, from fucks to complete butt shit, and what will be, and I am very certain, the most complete definitive edition, list of the year edition, weapon class, Elden Ring weapon class list in existence. So with that being said, we'll start with the best weapon class, the subscribe button, either now or later, but I'd appreciate it nonetheless. If not, that's cool. Thank you for watching. Second, recently started a podcast with my buddy Solid Snarf. It's called The Mighty Nerd. We talk about gaming. Feel free to check it out. Link in the description. Most recent episode is about China and whether or not they're saving gaming. Spoiler alert, they're not. All right, so first I'm going to just talk about my criteria for this list. So first, and arguably most importantly, we have the fun factor, whether or not this thing's fun to use. Second, the effectiveness of the weapon class. Obviously, pretty much the same with all these other categories, is that it can vary within each weapon class. Some weapons within the class are good, others not so much. However, the class as a whole will tend to trend in a certain direction. Third, we have the redundancy. How much like another weapon class is this weapon class? If one is better than the other, then I'll probably have whichever one is the best be the one that the others are based off of. But you can also just kind of tell which one they preferred based on how many weapons are within that class specifically. And lastly, we have the fantasy. So does the game support using this weapon? And I don't mean just does it do damage, does it not do damage, but do you feel like you are actually using that weapon when playing the game? Like, does it support the fantasy of using a dagger and being like a thief or a rogue or something like that? No, it doesn't. But still, that's an example of it. So without further ado, let's get this bitch started. First, we have curved swords. Are they fun? They can be. Are they effective? I don't find them that effective and not particularly all that exciting. I don't feel like this game supports the fantasy of using these finesse type weapons because you're always rolling around, which seems kind of crude. As opposed if you did sidesteps, it's such a simple, small thing, but if you sidestep like the way you did in Bloodborne, and I'm not talking about Bloodhound Step or Quick Step, it's not quite the same as the way the sidestep was in Bloodborne. I feel like if we had that, then maybe that fantasy would be more supported by this game. However, we don't, so it's not. However, I will say that one of the most absolutely busted dual-wielding weapons I've used pretty much my whole time playing this game was the Scavenger's Curve Sword. If you have two of those, things just explode in blood. It pretty much faster than most anything else I've used without having to do anything fancy like cast buffs or anything like that. Regardless, curved swords are just going to be pretty middle of the road for me. It is a weapon class. All right, next we got curved Greatswords. Unfortunately, these also fall victim to the same problems that curved swords fall victim to. Really, just when it comes to supporting the fantasy, I don't really think this game lends itself all that well to, once again, these finesse type weapons. However, I do feel like it supports the fantasy of these a bit more than the regular curved swords, just because I think this game lends itself just a little bit better towards like the Unga Bunga strength type stuff. I have had fun with them. They do a solid amount of damage. If I'm not mistaken, the Bloodhound one can also do bleed, which further increases its effectiveness. However, I do also feel like that these are a bit redundant of another weapon class we'll get to kind of soon. So unfortunately, that is also going to put these right next to their smaller brother, the curved swords. And I believe that the curved greatswords are just a weapon class. Next, we have the thrusting swords. I swear not every dex-based weapon is gonna be like this, but unfortunately the thrusting swords kind of are. Now, I personally kind of like these. However, there are just moments where this shit just doesn't work. Like the amount of times that you fight something that's really big and all you wind up doing is poking between the legs or just missing because all they do is thrust, understandably. And where they really shine is getting parries and backstabs and crits and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, if you can't parry fish for certain bosses or enemies, then it doesn't really work out all that well. Now, unlike another weapon type we'll be getting to in a bit, you can at least have some Ashes Wars on these things that will get enemies in a stagger or crit state much more easily than that specific weapon we'll be getting to in the future. In some weird way, I felt like these used to be better than they are in this game. I could be totally wrong. I expect that I'm wrong, but with that being said, my opinions are fact. So thrusting swords, I think, are almost him, but kind of fall just a bit short of that in my opinion. When these are in their element, they are really, really fun. All right, now we're moving on to greatswords. Now, I don't think this is a shocker for me, or probably even for FromSoft, but like greatswords fuck. They absolutely fuck. Look at how many weapons are in that class. Now, I'm not saying this applies to every single weapon class or weapon classes that have a lot of weapons within them. That doesn't mean that they're good. However, there's a bunch of them in here, and they all look really cool. I'm just partial to big swords, but as opposed to like the ultra great swords, regular great swords kind of strike that balance between being like comically large. Like they're not comically large to the point of being like kind of stupid. They're just big enough where you could believe that your guy would use something like this in the way that they are using it, which means that I really feel like the game supports this fantasy. And also the Moonlight Greatsword in this game kicks ass, which is almost never the case, I feel. And then there's the how to Greatsword video I did where I used the Iron Greatsword with the yelling build and the big attacks. That build was a shit ton of fun. I wound up using it for like a playthrough too. Greatswords have always been something that I love since I started playing Dark Souls, so me putting this in this tier, biased. But not as biased as the next one, because this might not surprise anybody, but this is going to be the best weapon class in the game. That just hands down, bar none. These games were built around the fantasy of using a sword and a shield. They don't always quite live up to that fantasy, I will say. However, I mean, just look what they put on the cover. Like the cover of Dark Souls and Dark Souls Remastered is person in armor, sword and shield. And then there's the fantasy of just being a regular ass knight, which based on the way that your guy moves, I mean, granted, I don't think most of us can dodge roll like the way our character in game does, but your character doesn't move with the same finesse and grace that maybe you would in Sekiro or in Bloodborne or in most any other action game. So I feel like when you're a knight in armor with just a sword and shield, and you're just the plain against the not so plain, the ordinary against the extraordinary, as I like to say, these games just absolutely support that fantasy, especially Elden Ring. I don't think any game has done it better. And the fact that using just a regular straight sword with the Ash of War that it comes with is so incredibly effective. It works incredibly well. Dual wielding these things also works incredibly well. Straight swords just absolutely fuck. They are the most turtle-like thing probably in this game. Probably in Souls-likes in general, arguably. Now, funny enough, we go from my most loved to my most hated, because daggers are complete butt shit in my opinion. I heard you wanted to be a rogue, where you could sneak in the shadows and backstab or parry or get crits on your enemies and take them down with one fell swoop. Well, this is not the game for you, because yeah, most of the time you fight enemies, they know where you're at, so it's not really like you're gonna be sneaking up on them like that. And then bosses, they always know where you're at, so it's not like you're gonna be sneaking up on them like that. Also, usually the hitboxes are just built in a certain way, and your guy swings in just a specific lovely kind of way where you miss like half the fucking time. And I'm not even talking about if you're dual wielding these goddamn things where you miss like 2/3 of the time, so somehow you swing more but hit less. It's fantastic. I don't feel like the fantasy for daggers gets fulfilled. They do like no damage. Granted, when you do get a crit, they do a lot of damage, but the damage is relative to the jack shit damage that they do already. So unless you're just absolutely juicing up on buffs and building around this thing, like in a way that you don't have to do with pretty much any other weapon type, the damage is just like okay at best when you're getting crits, and shit most of the time when you're just trying to hit things. There's pretty much nothing that daggers do that another weapon class can't do better, and I do find it funny that a lot of the times, not every time, I understand, that people talk about a dagger kicking ass is a Reduvia, and the only good part about it is that it flings a projectile that makes things bleed. So the best part about the dagger is when you're not doing dagger things with it. If you want more context for my opinion on daggers, or this enraged you and you want to get more mad, feel free to watch the I Hate Daggers in Elden Ring video. As an aside, if you like daggers, that's awesome, but I feel like daggers in pretty much all these games since Dark Souls and Demon Souls have been like, you know, have gone together like cheese and Oreos. Heavy thrusting swords. So I really want to like these, but I feel like when they added these to the game, they didn't quite know what to do with them, because they don't swing fast enough to warrant the lack of damage that they do. And then while the range is cool, they still just poke most of the time, so they also still have the problem of missing, especially when it comes to big enemies or particularly mobile enemies. And I feel like they should be cooler, especially the one that you get from fighting Placiducci, where it has the Ash of War where you go into the air and you turn into a cloud and then you come back down and do damage. But that thing just, it's like, it's kind of cool. It's not worth doing almost ever unless you just want to stunt or style or something like that. And I wish that things that look cool were also equally effective. Aside from that, there's the one that makes you bleed. I guess that's cool, but it swings so slowly that the bleed is just kind of whatever. I want to like these, but unfortunately, I think the execution didn't really quite pan out in the end. Heavy thrusting swords are a Morbius looking ass weapon. Now, I'm really inclined to like hammers in games like these. However, hammers kind of fall within that straight sword type thing. I know it's not the same, but it's just that whole, you know, medium to fast swinging one-handed weapons. Hammers just kind of don't really do it for me. The damage is cool, I guess. These can put things into a crit state a bit more easily than you can with straight swords. However, I don't feel like using hammers is as satisfying as it should be, considering that you're bonking things. Like, the impact just really isn't there for me, and I kind of wish it was. I feel like hammers have pretty much always been like this for the most part in Souls-likes, or at least the FromSoft ones. So I hope in the future they kind of bring this up, but unfortunately for me, it's gonna be a Morbius-looking ass weapon. Reapers are so fucking cool. They should be almost him at the very least. But unfortunately they're not going to be, because they just feel like whacker versions of Halberds, honestly. Like, the bleed is cool, and I did the how to be cool in Elden Ring video where I used the scythe. That was bitchin'. It just looks awesome. But this also has the problem of the game kind of not supporting the fantasy here. I wish that your character moved a little bit more elegantly, like for example when you use the burial blade in Bloodborne. I'm gonna keep making comparisons here because I feel like they're applicable, and where like using a scythe can be cool in this game, it also feels like square peg round hole kind of thing. I do like them, however I feel like they were just lumped in with the halberd category. That would have made significantly more sense. It probably would have uplifted that category even more. So Reapers unfortunately are just going to be a weapon class, and I will put them right here. All right, great hammers. And I know I've said this in at least one video before, but I'm pretty sure more than that. I love great hammers. However, they're really redundant when it comes to great hammers and great swords. And great swords offer a bit more build variety. Like, you could build great swords for strength. I think there are some that are scale better with dex, you know, and then you have great swords for each magic stat. Great hammers are pretty much just bonk exclusive, and they bonk very well. The large club is a great hammer, and after doing my most recent caveman video, had even more respect for it than I originally did. These also provide the really satisfying bonk that regular hammers don't give you, so that definitely one-ups these things compared to most other weapon classes, and they also stagger like a motherfucker, and I feel like the game does support the fantasy of just having hammer and bonking shit, like really bulky armor, supports that fantasy really well. That's why I'm gonna put great hammers in the almost him category. I might as well just put this up there too. Psych. Katanas are gonna be almost him. Now, I think a lot of people will probably put these in the fucks category, especially if we're talking about when the game just came out, which really goes to say how effective katanas are, and they can be fun, but like also they're fun in like almost a utilitarian kind of way, if that makes sense, because I don't feel like the game really supports the katana fantasy all that much. Yeah, you have the cool Ashes of War like Unsheath and the Millennium move, and that one blood katana move that people love to spam in PvP. But once again, if I'm going to compare this to games that actually support the katana fantasy, like, I don't know, Sekiro, having katanas in this game, and to be honest, how I've always felt in Dark Souls and pretty much every Souls-like game made by FromSoft aside from Sekiro, is that katanas look cool, they are cool, but like there's just that little bit extra that I wish the game did to make me really feel like I was a badass samurai using these things. But with that being said, nothing really replaces katanas. Katanas really aren't quite like anything else, at least to me. So despite all the shit talking that I'm doing, it's still gonna put katanas in the almost him category. The one that's not even close to being him is Flails. Flails, I don't know what the fuck happened with these. This should have been like an absolute home run. I don't feel like they've had Flails in their games before, if I'm not mistaken. I could be forgetting, I assume I am. However, stick, chain, spike ball thing should have been absolutely sick. But I don't get what the fuck they were trying to do with these. They're like hammers, but worse. You use these things, they don't do enough damage. Whatever bleed or status effects they do don't really make up for, you know, for the lack of pretty much anything else. This should have been badass. I should have been able to play like a really cool, I don't know what to call, like torturer, executioner, whatever you want to call, like some crazy crusader type build, but you know, the ones that were really fucked in the head. But to be fair, they all were. But still, this should have been awesome, but like they completely dropped the ball with this. Flails are butt shit, man. I tried it with these, and every time I tried, it felt like the game was just calling me a fucking idiot. However, you're not a fucking idiot if you use Colossal Swords, unless you were like me and you tried using them when the game came out, because back then they didn't swing all that fast, and the amount of damage they did wasn't worth it, considering that dual wielding pretty much anything else staggered things more quickly, did more damage, and was faster. However, with that being said, FromSoft really came through with these in the long run and made them kick an absolute shit ton of ass. However, with that being said, and this is a very personal thing for me, very personal, and I'm pretty sure if people might hate me for anything in this, it might either be the Daggers opinion or this one. I feel like using Colossal Swords looks really fucking stupid. Like, they're just comically large, and I get the whole Berserk fantasy, and it's probably one of those mangas that I might want to read in the future. However, I don't really read any of that stuff or watch anime, so until then, I'm kind of missing the point. They're cool, I like them a lot. However, being just giant swords, and this is going to sound really redundant in the future when we get to Colossal Weapons, it's like, it's kind of funny and ridiculous, and that's sick, but it also kind of breaks verisimilitude for me in a kind of way that makes me have to put Colossal Swords in the is a weapon class category. I know it's great. I love Colossal Swords. I love them. I should put them higher, but there's just that element of them that kind of like holds it back from me. And like, if I'm going to use a giant weapon, in fact, I'm going to skip now. I'm just going to go to Colossal Weapons right now. If I'm going to use a giant weapon and have it at least make somewhat sense, and this is going to be totally stupid, I know, considering that one of the weapons is a giant like omega dodeca like double dicking down trumpet, but Colossal Weapons to me are almost him. I know, it's just like, if I'm going to use a big weapon, it has to be a big bonk stick. So while the big trumpet is really fucking stupid for me, and like maybe you have the Giza wheel, which is also pretty stupid, and there are a lot of weapons that are stupid within this weapon class, but big club, caveman, love it. The big hammer, the highest strength requirement weapon in the game, but it's just sick. And I don't know why this is better for me than the Colossal Swords, aside from like if you're big into anime and Berserk, and I know this isn't everyone who loves Colossal Swords, I feel like you would be totally flip-flopped here, especially considering how redundant they are of each other. But just something about Colossal Weapons and the bonking over the big slashing kind of does it for me, because like I said, Greatswords strike that perfect balance of being bigger than a regular sword, but not just like, you know, like fucking Magnum XL huge. And Colossal Swords are just like comically large, and it's cool if you're into that, but like, I fuck with them hard, but I also have to be honest with how it makes me feel when I'm playing the game. Feel free to hate me in the comments below. I accept all hate I get for this. I get it. I totally get it. Great spears. Okay, Great Spears have one really sick weapon, and it's the lance, because the fantasy of using a big shield and a lance goes so fucking hard, and it's a goddamn shame that like nothing else within this weapon class really gives a shit. Like most of them are just like halberds, but worse. And unfortunately I have to dock points for that, as much as I do love the fucking lance. It's so cool. And like the Mogwin, whatever you want to call it, sacred spear, the pitchfork type thing, is kind of cool, but that's all I really have to say about that. Yeah, great spears are kind of like a Morbius type weapon. I will put them, they're almost is a weapon class though. Twinblades, how spicy do you want to get with this? Twinblades are cool. The Darth Maul builds that all came out when the game came out, cool, right? We can all agree about those, I hope. This is going to be a lot of things with the dex weapons, and not all Twinblades are dex weapons, but like the fantasy of using this, I just don't feel like it's there. Most of the time you just swing the thing and it's just like like you're swinging a paddle at them, and it's cool, and the damage is all right. It's pretty badass, but like the big problem you run into is like if you're trying to stagger something, I know it's like a weird point to bring up, but if you want to stagger something, the fact that the Twinblades jumping attack is a multi-hit doesn't do it, but it does multiple hits. But like there are just things where the Twinblades, as much as I love them, kind of fall short. And then I also feel like it's kind of dumb that it feels better to dual wield Twinblades than just use one two-handed, like, or that it's just more effective to do that, when I feel like Twinblades should also be like Colossal Swords and Colossal Weapons, where using them two-handed should be the best way to use them, because like why the fuck else would you make a weapon like that, at least to me? And so that's where it kind of drops the ball for the fantasy in a very big way. Ever since Dark Souls 2, I know everybody's favorite Dark Souls game, brought in Twinblades, I've always wanted to use them because they're really cool and I think they're sick, and I for the most part have a habit of doing at least one playthrough with them whenever there's a chance. But I wish they just went a bit more in the fantasy with these weapons, and unfortunately I do have to put them in the is a weapon class category. I am sorry. Halberds. Yeah, like my first playthrough was dual wielding halberds. Aside from that, just using one halberd on its own I think is pretty cool. Once again, the whole thing with having a lot of armor on and the fantasy of just, you know, using a halberd or just having a big shield and a halberd and being like that stalwart, you know, like a tower knight type shit, this game absolutely nails it for the most part, but not always, but enough for me to say that halberds are yeah, they're almost in. Just in terms of like pure enjoyment when using this weapon, yeah, halberds, I love halberds. I've always loved halberds in most any game I play where halberds are an option. If a halberd is sick, I am excited, and Elden Ring kind of nails that for me. at least for me. I think you also have some of the halberds that are the more fancy ones, like the Loretta's War Sickle. I can make the, you know, I can say what I have been saying for a shit ton of Dex weapons, where the fantasy isn't quite supported by the weapon, or the game doesn't support the weapon's fantasy. Loretta's War Sickle kind of gets a pass from me. Glinstone Staffs, I don't know why the fuck someone put this here. Like, that's not, is it about the staff or magic? I guess, okay, if it's magic, I don't know, man. I'm gonna leave magic for last. All right, spears. I just find spears to be, I should like them more. There was a point in time in previous FromSoft games where I did, but I just feel like spears in this game, aside from the, was it the cross naginata, that they just kind of there. They're really unexciting. This is gonna sound really dumb, but the one lance within the Great Spears category is like way more exciting and fun and cool than like everything in the spear category for me. So unfortunately, I have to kind of, I don't know, these are just whatever. Like, I mean, keep in mind with all the weapons, even if I rank them bad, like, they're usable. You can obviously do playthroughs with them. I've done playthroughs with Great Spear and the Spear and fucking, like, I tried doing with a heavy thrusting sword. It wasn't that fun for me, but, like, I've done playthroughs with them, but it's just, like, you know, at a certain point, you're just kind of like, eh, whatever. Like, you're just itching to change to something. At least I am. Axes kind of have the same problem as hammers, but not as much. They're kind of redundant to straight swords, once again, at least to me. I know not completely, but axes, the thing is that the Stormhawk axe, I like that they give you two whenever you pick them up, because I know it's from what's-her-face, Nepheli. Dual-wielding axes is pretty fucking cool. I'm just gonna say. And then also the Highland axe, it's such a weird thing. It's like I'm about to compliment an axe for the fact that I'm not using it, but the fact that there's an axe out there where you can like use it, or you just at least have it equipped, have it on your person, and your yelling becomes more effective, so you can kick more ass with something else, even another axe, I absolutely love. And there's something about like the I guess like the berserker barbarian type thing of dual wielding axes that I kind of think this game somewhat supports, not completely, but with the whole yelling stuff, pretty sick. However, I feel like it doesn't quite elevate itself above some of, like, you know, I'll say a lot of the middle of the pack weapons. And the fact that my favorite thing about axes is that it just supplement another weapon kind of makes me a hypocrite when it comes to daggers, but I also like using axes aside from that. I'm gonna put them right here. It's just a weapon class. It's fine. It's fine. Whips are a weapon class, all right. I don't even know. It's hard for me to say they're complete butt shit, because I've actually fucked with whips, and like in some sort of weird sadistic kind of way, they're fun, but they're also total dog shit. Like, it's awesome that whips can't be parried. I don't play PvP, and practically nothing in the game tries to parry you. So it's like, does that really matter for me? The range is really sick, and I do realize that they kind of have some potential to stagger enemies, not put them in a crit state, two different things, but just like, you know, you could stun lock some enemies with whips. But it's really the range that gives whips the pass to not be complete butt shit. And also, I did this really stupid fucking build, Sonic build, where I was trying to emulate his arms from Sonic Unleashed. So I was dual wielding whips, and I was playing on like New Game Plus 7, and I wound up doing, this was during my whole HUDless is the way to go kind of, you know, hippy dippy craze. And I fought Millennia on New Game Plus 7, HUDless, dual wielding whips while being blue and naked as Sonic. And I'm not gonna lie, that was like insanely fucking fun. Would I recommend other people do that? No, but if it sounds at all interesting to you, yes. But I also just can't get past all the other issues with whips that, like, it has to be a Morbius looking ass weapon. It like on the verge of being complete butt shit. It's like, it's such a meme weapon, but I still find it more usable than like flails and daggers personally. Greataxes. So Greataxes really just don't do it for me. I don't know why. Like, I feel like I should love these a lot more than I actually do, but it's hard for me to really put a nail on the head or whatever the phrase is. Great hammers do it for me. Great axes, not so much, especially considering that one is very redundant of the other, and I already find both of them very similar to great swords. But out of the three, great axes are just like meh. Like, I understand why people might dig them. They do a good job. They do some solid damage, but I don't feel like they have the same, they definitely can't bonk because they're bladed, obviously, but also there's just the stagger potential of great hammers that I feel like great axes just don't quite have. And because of that, I'm just gonna like the very middle. I think, well, no, I like Twinblades more. Claws, I don't understand why these aren't just fists. Like, I don't understand what the fuck the point of differentiating the two was. Claws are kind of cool, but they just don't do it for me in a way that fists kind of do. I guess it's maybe just, I guess if you're into Wolverine and stuff, maybe this might be cool. The bleed potential from claws is pretty sick, and I think they just have a little bit more reach than fist weapons do, so that gives them a little one up there. I feel like there's potential for these weapons in a different game that this game just doesn't give you. I'm gonna put claws like right fucking here. I guess I might as well just bring this up since I just spoke about claws, but fists. Yeah, fists are, you know, in my name, but like I think I'm gonna have to put them as a weapon class. It's gonna sound kind of crazy considering that like the back of this channel is built on a fucking fist video. Fist miss all the time, and if it weren't for the jumping attack, these would have to arguably be right next to claws, like if not in butt shit. But there's such undeniable joy that comes from just beating the ever-living fuck out of everything in this game. Punching Millennia to death was not the most fun I've had playing this game, as is most any time I fight her, but still, it's just it's so stupid when you think about like, I'm the greatest warrior in the land. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you with my fucking fist. And like, that was exciting. There's just some inherent joy when it comes to me using fists, and I'm going to do a video just going back to my fist build just to see, you know, how I feel about it nowadays. I'm sure I'll still like it, but I just think it'd be an interesting look back on almost 2 years later. Fists, they're a weapon class if I have to be totally honest, but I have good fun with them. Light bows, yeah, that's complete butt shit to me. I don't know. I've always associated bows with the thing that you use so you don't have to fight all the enemies at the same time. Like you fire an arrow at one enemy, and then they come to, you know, instead of you having to fight like 5 dudes at the same time, you kind of like pick them off one by one. And I don't feel like they're ever good enough to stand on their own. Now in the future, I might prove myself wrong by attempting to do a bow build. However, I have a very strong feeling it's gonna fall to the wayside just like the dagger one did. And especially light bows specifically, because they're like bows, but they do less damage. So they're just like less everything else, and they're not as good. So I might as well just go to bows now. There. I mean, once again, it's like light bows, but they do more damage. So at the very least, if you're gonna pick guys off one at a time, you can at least like warm them up a little bit more with bow shots. I feel like there's a possible world where this game can make doing a bow only build legitimately cool and fun and exciting. And maybe that's a world I just quite haven't explored yet, but I feel like it doesn't currently exist. And I guess last, Greatbows. I don't know. My first playthrough, I used the Radon Greatbow, and I thought it was good, but also the chances of you being able to use this thing ever is practically non-existent. Your guy has to fucking read the manual before he can fire a shot. Your guy has to wait for fucking True Crime Streets of New York on the original Xbox to load up before he can fire a fucking shot with this thing. Your man has to wait for Ark Survival Evolved, the original version on the Nintendo Switch, to load up before this thing can fucking fire a shot. It just doesn't really work almost ever in the middle of combat. It's just there if you want to get one shot off and you're like, haha, I did the cool thing, I shot you. But if you're in the middle of combat, you pulling this thing out is you pretty much accepting that you want to get fucking fondled. Yeah. As much as I think the Redaniel bow is sick, I have to be honest. Crossbows. Bro, I'm not being nice. Bows just, I don't know. Like, it's not as bad as those other two. It's kind of like bows for me, but the thing with like regular bows is you firing a shot, but crossbows, like, you have to load the shots. And as much as I love the triple shot crossbow, and I use that for my Bloodborne build, and I loved it. It was great. It was awesome. Having to constantly buy ammo for these things, I fucking hate that shit. I absolutely detest it. But now thinking about that Bloodborne build, I am going to put this above other Morbius ass weapons. And the last ranged weapon, the Ballista category, I don't even know what to say about this. Like, everything I said about the Greatbow, but even worse, arguably. But the cannon, it has the cannon. You have the cannon in it. And same for the Bloodborne build. If it weren't for that cannon, I would probably rate this worse than I already am. It's still butt shit. Yeah, it's still butt shit. I don't, I'll put it there. I'll put it there. No, I won't. No, I won't. That cannon damage, never fucking worth it. It takes like, you know, once again, it takes half a millennia and however long it takes for the 10th dentist to get with the other 9 of them. For this thing to reload, no, it's not that good. Torches, I'm going to save for last because that's a very hotly contested issue there. So, Glinstone Staffs. As much as I've never been a fan of magic in these games, there's no denying that I feel like they kind of knocked it out of the park with Elden Ring. Or maybe not knocked it out of the park. I still think games like Stranger of Paradise is the best magic in a Souls-like I've ever experienced, because it's so fluid with the melee combat that Strange Dead Paradise knows what it wants to do, and it does that really fucking well instead of trying to do a bit of everything. I don't think Glinstone, I don't think magic, because that's what I'm just going to be considering this as. I don't feel like magic is the coolest thing to use at all times, but I love that you can do a melee magic build, and the Kamehameha Wave is pretty badass. And then there's no denying how effective it could be when you stack a bunch of the buffs, and then there's the circle that allows you to do more damage, and the physic that, you know, you don't expend magic and that kind of shit. They're almost him. They're almost him. If it weren't for the fact that still in general, magic builds require you to rely on ranged attacks, I would rate these higher, but however, I don't find that kind of shit exciting, and I wish that maybe there was a little bit more variety in terms of the melee spells. But, you know, it's really good. It's really good for what it is. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have incantations. All miracles and shit like that have ever been in Souls-like games have just been buffs. It's just you putting buffs on yourself. You buff your weapon with lightning weapon or whatever, you know, this game will have you do. You buff yourself with the Sacred Oath, which has pretty much been a constant thing since Dark Souls 2. You buff yourself with the healing thingy, with the, you know, heal over time thing, or whatever it may be. And then what else can you do aside from that that's legitimately good? Wrath of the Gods, or whatever this game calls it, except in this game they kind of rightfully nerfed it, or it's pretty much been nerfed since Dark Souls 1. But still, I wish they gave incantations and miracles of faith and whatever the same love that they showed to sorceries and magic and that kind of stuff, because so far the only version of cool bitchin' melee incantations you could do is Catch Flame. That's it. And that's been a fucking spell in Dark Souls since fucking forever with Combustion. Every other melee incantation in this game is just bigger Catch Flame, and then the rest of them is like, oh hey, you can use these super cool dragon thunder weapons that, much like the Greatbows and the Ballistae, take absolutely forever to cast, so you'll never be able to get it off. And I'm fucking slurring at this point and just stuttering because I hate it. I fucking hate it. I wish these were cooler. It should be cooler, but it's not. And everything that is cool is totally just impractical to use in actual combat. But it's still, the buffs are good. The buffs are good, right? The buffs are really good. And Catch Flame, I did a whole playthrough casting nothing but Catch Flame, so it's good enough. It's a weapon class. Torches, what the fuck? Why is this a fucking weapon class? All right, and that about wraps things up here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know how much you hate my list. I'm sure almost everyone does, except for me at least. If you liked or enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, or dislike. I'm sure I'm going to be getting those with this video, but that's all good. Once again, feel free to check out the Mighty Nerd podcast. We're talking about all things gaming, as long as it's video games. And until next time, don't forget to always wipe before you shit.